Hey guys, in our last video for developmental psych, we're going to be talking about adulthood and reflecting on some of the stuff that we have talked about throughout the unit. So let's jump right into it. When we talk about physical development in adulthood, we need to know that muscular strength, reaction time, sensory keenness, and cardiac output crest in the mid-20s, and then they slowly begin to decline. These are barely perceptible physical declines of early adulthood, and they begin to accelerate during middle adulthood. For women, a significant physical change of adult life is menopause, and this is just simply the ending of the menstrual cycle, but it can take a very long time, and it can produce many side effects. A woman's attitudes and expectations influence the emotional impact of menopause. Men experience no equivalent of menopause and no sharp drop in the sex hormones. After middle age, most men and women remain capable of satisfying sexual activity. Life expectancy is affected by several factors. For example, with age, people's chromosome tips called telomeres, those wear down, and as this happens, aging cells die without being replaced. And also the human spirit affects life expectancy as evidenced by the death deferral phenomenon. And the death deferral phenomenon, for example, two psychologists from Japan report that in one recent 15-year period, 2,000 to 3,000 more Americans died on the 2 days after Christmas than on Christmas and the 2 days before. The death rate actually increases when people reach their birthdays, as it did for those who survived to the milestone first day of the new millennium. So, you know, death deferral means that we try to put death off until something, some sort of big event. In later life, declining perceptual acuity, muscle strength, reaction time, stamina, hearing, and the sense of smell are evident. Short-term ailments are fewer, but a weakened immune system makes life-threatening ailments more likely. Neural process is slow, and compared with teens and young adults, older people take a bit longer time to react, to solve perceptual puzzles, and even to remember names. Exercising the body feeds the brain, and it helps compensate for the loss of brain cells. And exercise helps maintain the telomeres, protecting the ends of the chromosomes. And some adults do suffer a substantial loss of brain cells, and up to age 95, the incidence of mental disintegration doubles roughly every 5 years. And Alzheimer's disease strikes 3% of the world's population by 75. And that's a very striking statistic. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is a series of small strokes, a brain tumor, alcohol dependence, etc., etc. These can progressively damage the brain, and this causes mental erosion that we simply call dementia. So dementia is just mental erosion as we age. Alzheimer's destroys even the brightest of minds. First, memory deteriorates, and then reasoning. The underlying symptoms of Alzheimer's is the loss of brain cells and deterioration of neurons that produce acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter. And when we're deprived of this vital chemical messenger, memory and thinking suffer. We could talk about Alzheimer's a lot. If you have any questions about Alzheimer's, please raise your hand and I'll be happy to answer those questions. As the years pass, recognition memory stays strong, although recall begins to decline, especially for meaningless information. And older adults may take longer than younger adults to produce words and things that they know. Older people's capacity to learn and remember skills declines less than their verbal recall. And prospective memory, which is remember to do this, remains strong even when events help trigger these memories. And without reminder cues, time-based tasks like remember this 8 o'clock meeting, and habitual tasks like remembering to take medications can be especially challenging. And I'm sure we all have some stories of a grandmother or great-grandmother or something like that who is forgetting to take their meds and it's becoming a problem. Cross-sectional studies are studies in which people of different ages are compared with one another, and these suggest that intelligence declines after early adulthood. And later longitudinal studies in which the same people were restudied and retested over a long period, reported that intelligence remained stable until late in life. And while cross-sectional studies failed to consider generational differences in income and life experience, longitudinal studies failed to account for those who dropped out of studies and who may have been less intelligent than their survivors. Furthermore, intelligence is not a single trait, and tests that assess speed of thinking may place older adults at a disadvantage because of their slower neural mechanisms for processing information. So it all depends. Today's view is that crystallized intelligence, and this is one's accumulated knowledge and verbal skills as reflected in vocab and analogies test, increases up to old age. And fluid intelligence is our ability to reason speedily and abstractively, like solving novel logic problems. That declines slowly up to age 75 and then more rapidly, especially after age 85. Some psychologists have suggested that adults progress through an orderly sequence of life stages, and they argue, for example, that as people enter their 40s, they undergo a midlife transition to middle adulthood, which for many can be a crisis. However, research has failed to support this idea that distress peaks anywhere in the midlife range. Moreover, critics suspect that given variations in the social clock and individual experience, any proposed timetable of adult ages and stages will have limited applicability. Marriage, parenthood, retirement, and other life events that make transitions to new life stages are occurring at unpredictable ages. Even chance encounters and events can have lasting significance, and as a result, adults may change far more and far less predictably than stage theories suggest. Two basic aspects of our lives dominate adulthood, and Erik Erikson calls them intimacy, which is forming close relationships, and generativity, which is being productive and supporting future generations. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that marriage had survival value for our ancestors, and that parents who stayed together and raised children to a childbearing age had a greater chance of passing their genes on to posterity. Compared with their counterparts 40 years ago, people in Western countries are better educated and they're marrying later, yet they are nearly twice as likely to divorce. So a big question is, does cohabitating before marriage lessen the likelihood of divorce? No, studies do not show that. In Europe, Canada, and the United States, those who cohabit before marriage have higher rates of divorce and marital dysfunction than those who did not cohabit. But nonetheless, more than 9 in 10 heterosexual adults marry, and research indicates that married people are generally happier when compared with the unmarried. And often love will bear children, and as children begin to absorb more and more time, money, and emotional energy, satisfaction within the marriage may decline. Most parents are happy to see their children grow up, leave home, marry, and have careers. Oh, I'm sorry. For adults, a large part of the answer to who are you is the answer to what do you do, which is work. Choosing a career path is very difficult, especially in today's changing work environment. It frequently takes time for people to settle into an occupation, and most people shift from their initially intended majors, and many find their post-college employment in fields not directly related to their majors, and most will end up changing careers. Happiness is having work that fits your interests and provides a sense of competence and accomplishment. And just a little side note, most studies today on marriage and what makes a marriage work actually prove that friendship is one of the biggest keys to marriage. So you have to be friends with your spouse and if you want it to work. Although the over 65-years are not totally unhappy, new surveys of 2 million people worldwide suggest happiness is slightly higher among both young and older adults than among those middle-aged. If anything, positive feelings grow after midlife and negative feelings subside. Older adults increasingly use words that convey positive emotions. And moreover, the bad feelings we associate with negative events fade faster than do the good feelings we associate with positive events. And as the years pass, feelings mellow and the highs become less high and the lows less low. Moreover, people flourish into later life thanks to biological, psychological, and social cultural influences. Usually the most difficult separation is from one's spouse. Grief is especially severe when the death of a loved one comes before its expected time on the social clock. The normal range of reactions to a loved one's death is wider than most people suppose. Some cultures encourage public weeping and wailing, others hide grief. Within any culture, some individuals grieve more intensely and openly. Research discounts the popular idea that terminally ill and bereaved people go through predictable stages. Life itself can be affirmed even at death, especially if one's life has been meaningful and worthwhile. So here's a chart showing you the biopsychosocial influences on successful aging. And let's talk, we're going to reflect just a little bit. The first issue that we're going to talk about is the relative influence of nature versus nurture. And it's discussed in the neurobiology unit that we just finished. And regarding continuity versus stages, researchers who emphasize experience and learning tend to see development as a slow, continuous process. Those who emphasize biological maturation tend to see development as a series of genetically predisposed changes. Although the stage theories of Piaget, Kohlberg, and Erikson have been modified in the light of later research, each theory usefully alerts us to differences among people of different ages, and it helps us to keep the lifespan perspective in view. Research also suggests that lifelong development includes stability and change, and the first 2 years provide a poor predictor of a person's eventual traits. Older children and adolescents also change. And as people grow older, however, personality does stabilize, and there is also an underlying consistency to most people's temperaments and emotionality. So, I know that was a lot of talking, not a lot of slides, but feel free to rewind, get what you need to get, and this is a good chart right here showing continuity and stages. These are the 3 people that you need to know the most about as far as your test goes. You need to know Kohlberg's morality stages. Remember that motivation or that morality problem that I put up on the board. Erikson's stages of development, and also Piaget's stages of development. And that's it. Thanks, guys.